Hey guys, we're back to my ranking of the MCU films, of most of them save Eternals and Multiverse of Madness for various reasons, but we're doing 18 to 11. So let's conversationalize. Number 18, Thor: Love and Thunder. Now, I realize that a lot of you are, watching right now, and some of you, actually probably all of you, are thinking to yourselves, what the mess? He put Love and Thunder above Ragnarok? We will hunt him down for that! And you are entitled to your own opinion, but I am as well. And I think the reason that I like this movie more than Ragnarok, which I never thought I would ever say that before watching it, I really liked it actually, and the reason for that is because it actually fixes some of the things that Ragnarok broke for me. One of the smaller things is that, where was Sif in Ragnarok? Sif was nowhere to be found. We know what happens to Sif now. She's back, and I did at least appreciate that we got something from her. And then they also fixed the fact that, Jane was just ratted off in the last movie. They totally fixed that in this one. And, before the movie came out, like I mentioned with gender swapping the characters, why are you just making a girl version of Thor? I don't like it when they do that. But the way they actually did it in this movie, I think she is my favorite iteration of the girl version of the original character because of the way they wrote it. The idea of Jane having cancer and, Thor enchanting the hammer to always protect her, which is what allows her to wield it in the first place, that's actually a really good idea and a very well-written idea. And the movie did definitely, even as goofy as it was, make me feel some big emotions, because I did have emotional ties to Jane as a character from the first two Thor movies, because I grew up with, the first Thor movie was one of the first Marvel movies I'd ever seen in theater. And so I grew up with those characters, and so, to see Jane, wait, she has cancer? That's, really sad. That kind of breaks my heart. And so I genuinely felt some big emotions with that, and especially with her death in the movie, and how she fades away like Odin did into, the Asgardian dust, I guess. And, she actually gets to go to Valhalla like the other Asgardians. I thought that was actually really cool, and a well-written arc for her character. Also stand out here is Gore the God Butcher. Another thing I really appreciate about just really all movies is when you begin with your villain. The first scene in the movie is detailing something about your bad guy and not about your good guy. And I didn't expect that at all going into the movie. I thought it was just going to start up right off the bat with a joke. But no, it starts out with Christian Bale's Gore and his backstory, and it's dang, that's dark, but it's good. It's well written. I will say I wish we would have gotten more of him, because he's a really good bad guy with a really good backstory and a phenomenal ending to his life that affects Thor in a big way. But I really wish he was used more. I did feel he was a little underutilized. I've seen other people critique the movie for he's called Gore the God Butcher and he doesn't butcher a lot of gods, and I am kind of with that. I do wish we would have gotten to see him butcher a lot more gods in this movie, because he's the God Butcher. But overall, I enjoyed the film. I enjoyed the emotion that Thor was presented to have, and the fact that he has a daughter at the end of it, a surrogate daughter. I think, and the fact that it's Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter does definitely elevate it for me. So I actually really enjoyed the movie, and it's weird because I don't think anyone else did, and I'm the only one, which that actually does happen a lot more often than you might think. Number 17, Doctor Strange. This movie, I really enjoy it. I like the way they did the magic, of how it looks, of the aesthetic to it. It's just really cool the way they did his sorcerer origin story. As well as Benedict Cumberbatch was a phenomenal casting choice for the character. And yes, it is a repeat of the plotline they chose for Thor and Iron Man. A guy who's really arrogant at the beginning, goes on the hero's journey and then becomes selfless in the end. But it still does the formula well. It still performs it pretty well. And it is very compelling that even as arrogant and as jerky as Stephen Strange is at the beginning of this movie, you still really do feel bad for him when he loses his hands and loses the thing that he loved doing for so many years. And, of course, that leads him to becoming Doctor Strange in the first place. But Benedict Cumberbatch does a phenomenal job. Like, it's one of the best things he does in this movie is making you believe this guy's pain. Like, you really see his discomfort and his genuine disdain for his situation in life in those moments. I also love the ending of this movie, the Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Like, that's a really interesting way to end a Marvel movie because, so many of the Marvel movies do end with a giant battle in the air and this airship and there's an army, and so many of them do. But this movie actually ends in a more interesting way of, like, the bad guy is so powerful, and our hero is relatively inexperienced compared to the other sorcerers. Like, he's only just started out. So he has to find his own way to outsmart him. But seeing, Doctor Strange outsmart him in his own way is just really cool. And my family and I have quoted that line, Dormammu, I've come to bargain, for a little while now. Number 16, Iron Man 2. Again, you guys are probably like, this guy's nuts. This guy's crazy. I'm not watching him anymore. This is just too out there. I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. Phase 1 is actually my favorite phase of the MCU, I think because it's the simplest. It definitely has fewer films, and I think that actually helps it. And this movie is no exception. Even though it does have a lot of plot lines to work with, I think they actually all make sense and blend well together. I don't mind Whiplash as the bad guy. I think his backstory is, again, it's a movie where it begins with the villain. You immediately see why he is the way he is, but you already had the setup for the villain. And because the setup does fall in line with, like, the ending of the first Iron Man movie, you don't feel like the character just came out of nowhere. Like, oh, now all of a sudden we have this villain who wants to take revenge on Tony Stark. Like, where did he come from? Like, it does feel naturally integrated. And with the several plot lines, it's sort of like when you're going to buy a house, one of the main things that you pay attention to is the layout of the house. How well did the constructors of the house use the space that they chose? Like, use the space that was given to them. Where did they put the placement of the rooms? That's kind of what I compare movies to. It's like, if you have a lot of plot lines, there is a way to do it correctly, and there is a way to, like, you can have a good layout to the house if you construct it correctly and make this room one size and make this room the other. But if you don't have a good layout and everything just feels closed in and not fleshed out enough, it's not going to be great. This movie, I think, does a way better job of what Age of Ultron tried to do with a billion other plot lines. That movie was a lot more unfocused, but this movie does still have a central narrative of Iron Man, and like everything that Tony is dealing with is all of the other plot lines affect that central plot line. So I think once you do have the sun in the middle of all the planets rolling around the solar system, I think the ton of plot lines thing does work, and that's why I like this movie a lot more than everybody else does. Again, Robert Downey Jr.'s charisma. I love the scene when he's in the courtroom at the beginning of the movie. I just love how much of a sarcastic jerk he is to the judge. Overall, I like this movie a lot. Number 15, Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, when I first saw this movie in theater, as I was watching it, I guess about like maybe halfway through the movie, I was like, man, this movie really isn't impressing me. Like, I don't feel like we're really going anywhere. Then as soon as the Mysterio twist happened, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a phenomenal Spider-Man movie. And other people did criticize that scene for just total exposition dump, which it is, but it does it in a really good way. Like, he's celebrating with his crew of all the great accomplishments they've accomplished over the years, and I feel like that is a natural way to also explain to the audience what has been going on. And by tying his backstory to Barf, that technology that was introduced in Civil War, and one of his crew members being Ralph from A Christmas Story, but the guy that, Obadiah Stane talked down to in the first Iron Man, when he's like, Tony Stark built this in a cave with a bunch of scraps. My dad loved quoting that line. But, tying all of those plot lines together was actually really smart. But this movie also does a great job of, the way it treats Spider-Man dealing with Tony's death. Like, he can't use his spider sense really anymore because the last time he did it, he just remembers Tony every time. And he feels like he can't be the hero that he needs to be without his help and without Tony's guidance. But I love how Spider-Man overcomes this. And I also love the way they did Mysterio in the movie, of how, like, it's a mocap suit. Because before the movie came out, I was really wondering, like, how are they going to integrate this character into a live-action movie? Because I love the character of Mysterio, I always have. But taking a guy with a purple cape and a green outfit and a fishbowl head is really hard to make, you know, sort of, like, semi-realistic and compelling in a live-action movie. Would be just kind of more goofy than intimidating. But the way they do it is actually really neat, because he, like, wears a mocap suit, like his actual suit that he, like, with the cape and the superhero outfit is an illusion in and of itself. And all of it is done by, like, these cameras and the drones. And, like, the first fight that he has with Spider-Man is the perfect live-action Spider-Man battle. Like, that's the battle you see in the cartoons all the time when Mysterio fights Spider-Man was brought into live action, and it is just so cool to see that it was just so cool to see that finally on the big screen and in the real world aesthetic. Moving on to Ant-Man and the Wasp, number 14. I was right, number 14. This movie is one of the funniest in the MCU for me, and by far, because of that, one of the most enjoyable. Even though the villain in this movie, Ghost, isn't like she's not the best villain. Like, it was another gender swap. He was a dude in the comics, Ghost was, but they turned Ghost into a girl in this movie. I don't know why, but this movie has some of the best funny dialogue. Just like they give Paul Rudd so many great one-liners, and I don't think another scene in the MCU makes me laugh more than the interrogation scene where Sonny Burch interrogates Louise, Dave, and Kurt, the Russian. That scene is comedy gold. Like, where Louise is breaking down and doing the flashback of, like, he's talking about where Scott Lang is emotionally speaking. It's just, so many laugh out loud moments. Like, no, I'm, like, consistently laughing out loud the entire scene. Especially when he's talking about when Wasp and Ant-Man first meet, and Wasp is doing, like, I don't want nothing to do with you, I'm all business. And then Scott is like, I don't really know what you're talking about right now, girl, but dang, girl, I want to kiss you. It's great. It's great. It's hilarious. I love it so much. And I think because it's a MacGuffin story, like, there's the one lab that everybody else is trying to get, it provides some nice tension and urgency in the movie. Because of that, like, you have several people trying to get this one object, and because of the lighthearted nature of the movie, it just makes for some really fun antics. No pun intended. So yeah, this one is a full thumbs up. Number 13, Spider-Man Homecoming. This movie does a phenomenal job of detailing Spider-Man in his, like, formative years. Like, before he's fighting as big of villains as the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus and Electro and Venom. They're very small stakes, but it makes it more personal. And you really get to know Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man in this movie. It is a great first official Spider-Man movie in the MCU. Like, they pulled it off phenomenally. And another big standout here is Michael Keaton as the Vulture. His whole plot line is actually, it's really good. It's very well written. Like, Michael Keaton does a great job of playing this grumpy guy who he's, like, really concerned about protecting his family to the point where he'll kill other people and their families just to protect his family. Like, it's a psychotic viewpoint, but the way he plays it, you can have sympathy for him, especially considering how he lost his job because of damage control, and now he kind of just hates the government, and he hates the system, and he hates the way it works because of how they wronged him. And, like, the moment where he's talking to Spider-Man and he's like, you know, those guys up there, the rich and powerful, they don't care about us. That we build their roads for them, we fight their wars for them, they don't care about us. That whole speech that he gives is not entirely wrong, and you can totally have sympathy and, I guess, empathy also for his character in that moment, because you're sitting there going, yeah, he's not that wrong. They do kind of take advantage of us sometimes. So this movie has a great plot line for Spider-Man and has a great plot line for the villain. So you mix those two things together, you get gold. Next up, number 12, Thor. Like I said previously, I've always had a great nostalgia for this movie because it was one of the first MCU movies I saw in theater. And the main thing I love about this movie is Thor's hero's journey. He starts out as this, overambitious, arrogant prince who, will pick a fight even if there's not a fight to be picked, even if it means total war. Like, he wants to make sure that these people who could threaten Asgard go down, and they stay down. And you can understand where he's coming from, but you can also see that he's really just doing this because of his pride and because of his belief that he is the best and that he should be king. And he's kind of just trying to prove that to his dad, even though his dad is trying to teach him the exact opposite lesson. And then after Odin banishes Thor to Earth for his actions and Thor becomes immortal, his interactions with Jane and Eric Selvig and Darcy and this, just this very small town in New Mexico, such the opposite from, the glamorous golden palaces of Asgard. He really does go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and from this place of grandeur to this place of absolute humility. Small town, normal people, but learning the ways of the Earthlings, getting to see his interactions, like I said, teaches him the lesson that Odin was trying to teach him, and that the reason you take action should be because you care about others and because of your love for them, not because you're trying to prove that you're the best or you're the most powerful or you can kick the most butt. Because he sees the way Eric Selvig cares about Jane and the way Jane cares about her science stuff and figuring out these different things. He learns to care about what they learn to care about. And it's really just a nice story that turns into this grand scale one when Thor has to take up his mantle at the end of the movie and become the true superhero. I think that's the thing I love about this movie, is that it's actually an origin. It's as far as superhero origin stories is concerned, Hulk, his origin story is when he actually turns into the Hulk for the first time. And Iron Man's origin story is when he's in the cave and he dons the suit for the first time. But Thor's origin story is not when he gets born for the first time, and he's always had the powers that he has. But his actual origin story as a superhero is in this movie of him starting out as this arrogant prince who just wants to throw as many punches as he can, and then turning into this selfless, true hero who puts the well-being of others above himself. And he learns this lesson so well that he's willing to sacrifice his life that he might have with Jane to save the frost giants, who have been nothing but trouble from Loki, even if it means sacrificing his relationship with Jane. That's really cool. He starts out wanting to just destroy all the frost giants and kill them all, and then learning that, no race and no people should die if they don't have to. And that everybody deserves a second chance. And that you shouldn't kill unless you have no other choice. And he learns that lesson at the end of this movie, and just seeing that hero's journey play out is truly something to behold, and I really love it. Number 11, The Incredible Hulk. This movie is super special to me. I have always loved this movie, and the why is because this, to me, is the perfect Hulk film. I don't think if they ever make a superhero, if they ever make a Hulk movie in the future, they're never going to get better than this one. I think this will always be the coup de grace, because it's exactly what you expect from a Hulk movie. He's on the run from General Ross, who's trying to hunt him and capture him because he wants to use the Hulk DNA to create an army of Hulk soldiers or super soldiers. And it actually starts out that way. It does a montage of kind of how he became the Hulk, and then just chooses to jump forward in time, and then we start off with him actually in the process of being in hiding and having to be on the run from Ross. I think that was actually a really good idea instead of just starting with his origin, because we all know it's not that complicated of an origin. Okay, he gets exposed to gamma radiation. That's how he becomes the Hulk. But this movie tells a story following all of that initial stuff. So I think you could start off from the place of, okay, what is it like to be a man who can potentially at any moment, if you get angry enough, turn into a raging monster that might kill people. Like, you start from that place, and him being on the run, and already the tension is built because you know he's on the run. So like from the get-go, you have like, okay, what's going to happen? Because you know Ross is hunting him. You know that he could snap at any moment. That is the perfect Hulk movie. That's the perfect. I think they just did it in the perfect way, and they also chose the perfect villain for it. Like the way they do Emil Blonsky in this movie, writing him as this ambitious soldier he's aged, but he's also still, he has that spry spirit of like, he wishes he was younger so he could kick more butt, and that's what Ross offers him in the super soldier serum, and he like gets this power, he wants more and more and more, and he sees what the Hulk can do, he's like, I want that power, which leads him to becoming the Abomination. I think that's the perfect arc for Abomination. I think that's the perfect arc for Emil Blonsky. This is I think my favorite version of Abomination across all mediums, by far, is this one. And Liv Tyler as Betty Ross, I think, was a perfect casting choice, because it's Betty's connection to Hulk, like in the comic books, like that specific relationship that they have, like the woman who's in love with the monster who nobody understands. I think Liv Tyler acted that whole story out perfectly. Like, you fully buy into her love for the Hulk, and I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when she's in the cave and Hulk's like wanting to protect her from the thunderstorm, and when the lightning cracks and the thunder roars, Hulk just throws a rock at the sky and screams at it. That is just so flippin' cool. It's so good. And like, Hulk is big in this movie, and he's like, his roar is loud, and it's just, you get like, he is a monster, but he's also a likable monster. He's a monster with a heart. And the other big thing that we have to talk about is the fight scene at the end of this movie. It is the perfect climax to a Hulk movie, of the Hulk versus the Abomination, the two monsters just duking it out, using cop cars as boxing gloves, and Hulk ripping out Abomination's shoulder spike and then stabbing him in the pectoral with it. That's the kind of brutal Hulk violent battle that you want to see from a Hulk movie, and that's why I love it so much. It's the perfect Hulk film, so it makes it in a way a perfect superhero film because of the superhero they chose.